Good morning, everybody. I'll just give people a couple more minutes to join because we've just gone live. Okay. Look at all those good mornings in the chat. And indeed, it is a very good morning. Welcome back. As you will know, if you've been following me, I have been so excited. I have been up since 4 o'clock this morning. So very, very pleased. I'm just bringing up my notes on the other computer. Bear with me. We're just waiting to see if we can fix a slight echo on the line, on Roger's line, and then we'll be with you. Bear with. We'll get started and see how we go. We've got another great program for you today, as you would expect. And there's a little bit of fun going on as well, because we are all proposing our planthems, the anthems and ballads and power songs that get us through those more difficult days. So head over to @the_EPS1 and @LucyGobag to make sure you've put your planthem contender in. We do have a planthem Spotify. So Roger will be asking you at the end of the talk, what is your planthem? So today, great program, continuing the theme of change required, and also some shout outs for things like the Emergency Planning Book Club. One of the most anticipated sessions always is when we have somebody over from the Civil Contingency Secretariat. It's been a quiet year for them, for all of us, so nothing much to update. I'm obviously being sarcastic here. We are desperate for news from the Civil Contingency Secretariat, so it is great to hear from Roger Hargreaves, who is our director at the CCS, joined in 2020. Prior to that, several earlier postings in the CCS and a range of senior roles across government, most recently in Department for Transport, where he was Maritime Director. So without further ado, if you can post your questions to Roger in the chat, and what we're going to do is group them. If I can make a cheeky request, if you can put them actually in the Q&A form, that's the easiest place. I will check in on the chat, but Q&A form is the best place to put them. Then we can mark whether they've been answered. If you're calling in via phone, that's *9. We are not going to ask questions live. We're going to group them from the chat, so do put them into the Q&A. I don't think there's any polls in this session, but we'll let you know if that changes. And obviously your name may appear on the recording, although you won't appear personally on the recording. The Zoom session today is being recorded and will be made available along with additional FAQs and resources. A link will be sent out after the conference to members. If you've got any questions for me, stick them in the chat. Questions for Roger, stick them in the Q&A. And Roger, it's over to you, please.
Thank you very much. And can I just check that you can hear me all right on the basis we had some slight technical problems earlier? Am I coming through clearly? Excellent. That's great news. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. As Lucy said, I am Roger Hargreaves. I am the Director of the Civil Contingencies Secretariat. I have been since last October. I'm joining you from our new National Situation Centre, which is one of the post-COVID changes we made to how we operate in the centre of government. It's a fantastic new facility which is designed to improve the way we use data, particularly for the most complex emergencies. And unfortunately, I can't really give you a tour around for a variety of security reasons, but you can at least see the very large screen behind me. So I think before I get into my sort of general remarks about the state of the nation, as it were, just a word on me by way of background. I mean, as I say, I've been director of CCS for coming up to a year now, but this is not my first engagement with the civil contingencies field. I first got involved almost 20 years ago, not long after the Civil Contingency Secretariat was established, and led the team which delivered the Civil Contingencies Act. So I have a great fondness for the Act, and I have, I suppose, a foundational experience in the process of going through delivery of the Act, and a deep personal attachment to the importance of resilience as a topic, to the role that the local level particularly plays in delivering resilience, and the importance of having systems that work and a really strong relationship from CCS out to everyone else who is engaged in the field. So what I thought I would do is just give you a tour through the landscape as we see it at the moment, and then there is plenty of scope for any questions that you've got as we come along, as we go along. But we'll pick those up at the end. So I thought I'd start with a bit of a sit rep on live issues and some of the issues we faced over the last year or so, because I'm very conscious that this has been an extraordinarily busy period that we have been through, and it promises to be an extraordinarily busy period over the next year. And it's worth reflecting on why that is and what that means in practice for what we do, because I think it is a really important framing piece of context for all of our work in all parts of the resilience field. So centrally, over the last year, COVID has provided a backdrop to everything. And whilst we are not at the peak of the difficulties that we faced, and whilst some of the more difficult moments are hopefully behind us, we are absolutely still feeling the impacts of COVID, both because there are many things that still need to be done to manage the ongoing response, but also because it leaves a huge interest in resilience. It leaves a body of people who've been involved in the work around the pandemic who are pretty worn out by it all. But it also demonstrates the importance of resilience as a kind of really central issue in the life of the country. Layer over that the Brexit experience, which, even if we didn't get to the place that we thought we might at some points around no deal, involved a huge amount of planning right across the resilience community. That talks a lot about how we plan, and it talks a lot about the society that we work in and the economy we work in. And much of that work has found itself employed either in COVID or other emergencies, some of which we face right now. And then, of course, over the last year, we've seen the same problems that we see every year. So severe weather and serious flooding, business failure, significant local emergencies, and so forth. So it has been an extraordinarily busy year, 18 months or so. But I do see, alongside the challenges, a lot of opportunity there, because it does mean that people are perhaps uniquely now interested in resilience as a topic and want to see it done well and effectively. And I think we'll have more of the same, to be honest, over the coming year. We are seeing at the moment a huge amount of pressure on the systems that we have to make good against a series of challenges, some of which relate to COVID, some of which are about the sort of general state of the economy as a consequence of COVID. Our newspapers now, our media now is full of stories about energy supply problems, the pressures on energy suppliers, what that might mean for business. Lots of discussion about the extent to which those problems with energy supply are now manifesting in other supply chain areas. You know, I think we always thought this would be a difficult winter. I think we're seeing it now. And I think the amount of work that we're having to do to keep things ticking along is already putting huge pressure on us. Layer across that potential further problems with COVID, layer across that the usual winter pressures, layer across that any further issues around Brexit, any wider supply chain instability through the winter, potential business failures, because of course the COVID experience has created instability across the economy as a whole, and it could be a very difficult winter. I think we recognise that very clearly, but again, it will be a moment, I suspect, where people in the resilience field are expected to step to the fore and play a centrally important role in making sure that we are able to tackle any crises that come our way and ideally nip them in the bud. But if they're not nipped in the bud, help to deal with the consequences and make sure that the impacts on the economy and society are absolutely minimised. I'm sorry that's a slightly bleak outlook. I'd love to tell you that nothing is going to go wrong and we're going to enjoy a lazy autumn before a well-deserved 4-week break at Christmas. But I feel I must be honest with you and say that the prognosis is at the very least mixed. But I'm sure many of you, well, all of you, will absolutely understand the background to that, and you are presumably prepared for that. So at that point, I wish you luck. I think we will certainly need it, as well as a lot of hard work. But like I said, this is about opportunities as well as challenges, and the salience of resilience as an issue and the lessons from the pandemic and Brexit and so forth are ones that we have to absolutely take seriously. There is a moment to be seized, and so in CCS we are trying to do that by setting a new agenda around resilience and trying to get ahead of any COVID inquiry, get ahead of any inquiries into Brexit, think now about what we can learn and what we can implement. So the centerpiece of a lot of that work is the resilience strategy, which we are working towards. The integrated review, which was published in the spring. I mean, periodically the government publishes a sort of security and defence review. The integrated review was the latest incarnation of that. It was interesting from a resilience perspective because I think previous reviews have touched on resilience, touched on the importance of civil protection, emergency planning, but didn't make it a central feature. And I think the experience of COVID particularly meant that this integrated review did not just pay lip service to resilience, but identified it as one of the key pillars of our national economic and social security. And that was really positive and really important. And there was a recognition there, absolutely, from the top of government, that unless you get resilience right, you've got a fundamental and long-term problem. So the commitment in the integrated review was to deliver a resilience strategy, and we are working towards delivering that strategy around spring of next year. So how are we approaching that work? Well, hopefully you have all seen and are engaged in the call for evidence that we are running at the moment. That goes on for another week or so. I am hoping that we will get a very significant body of evidence as a consequence of going out and asking the questions that we have on the direction we might take. But I will say that the choice to go for a call for evidence is not an accident. It's very easy to say, okay, well, we're going to just go out with strategy and not discuss it at all. It's very easy to go out and say, here is a consultation on our proposed strategy, and expect that people will either say yes or no, or suggest some tweaks to essentially a pretty clear proposition. Call for evidence is a device to say, look, we genuinely want to have an open conversation about where we're going on this. We want you to bring evidence and bring ideas to the process. We want this to be an act of co-creation, not simply a description by government of what it wants to do and an expectation that people fall into line behind it. So this is consciously a choice to engage in a conversation, and we are very much hopeful that people will do that. The evidence bit is important too, because of so much happening on the resilience front over the last 2 to 3 years. Picking the bones out of it, actually working out what it tells us, is tricky, and many people have views. So grounding that in really strong evidence, domestic evidence, international evidence, evidence from recent emergencies, evidence from wider research, getting evidence from people who previously hadn't thought about resilience. These are all central elements of making a call for evidence operate effectively. So if you are planning to respond to the call for evidence, I'm really pleased. If you already have, I'm delighted. If you haven't yet thought about doing it, then I would encourage you to do so. And I would say respond, because sometimes it is the weight of response, the strength of the interest, that sends a signal as much as the evidence itself. So I would encourage you to respond to that call for evidence. So how do we think the strategy will be framed when it finally comes out? Well, there's some things we say in the call for evidence document that we think will endure, though we are testing them through the call for evidence process. The first is our overall vision for resilience. We describe our ambition as wanting the UK to be the most resilient nation. So that was something which ministers here were very keen on as an idea, and it does sound like the kind of simple slogan that that a politician likes, and an official like me thinks, oh well, that sounds a bit high level and simple. Couldn't we have something more sophisticated? But of course, like any good official, I've come to see the wisdom of my ministers' views on this topic. And the reason it works as a vision, to my mind, is what we're not after is doing as much as we possibly can on resilience. What we're not after is measuring the inputs. What we're after is outcomes when it comes to resilience. And being a resilient nation means ending up in a place where the kind of dislocations that emergencies can create are minimized, so that people can be confident. They can be confident about how they go about their lives. They can be confident, if they're a business, about their investment choices. People can be confident in making long-term plans, and they can know that when emergencies do happen, as they always do, they will be well managed and disruption will be minimized. So it is a point about confidence, and the UK being a place where people can be more confident than anywhere else. And it's that kind of idea which provides the foundation for that. We set out 3 high-level principles in the call for evidence. Again, we're testing these. First is about the foundational importance of risk. Risk is the thing which unlocks so much on resilience. It is the evidential platform. It is the kind of golden thread which runs through stuff. And to our mind, it is the most powerful driving force in any debate about the shape of resilience, the shape of emergency planning. And getting people to understand the risk landscape is what unlocks everything else. The second principle is that prevention is better than cure. A world in which resources and effort is weighted towards response might be a necessity, as we have seen, but actually preventing risks coming to pass as issues, making sure that we are balancing effort, getting people to consider resilience, building it into systems, making investment choices that are the right ones, rather than simply ignoring the risk landscape and dealing with the consequences further down the line. That's what we think we have to be aiming for. The third principle is a very central lesson from both Brexit and COVID, which is the whole of society has a role to play. This is not about a sort of parent-child relationship between government and everyone else. Public sector doesn't just fix problems and everyone else looks to government when problems arise. Everyone should have expectations on them around resilience, and the clear articulation of those expectations should be a central feature of the resilience strategy. So vision, principles, we're testing all of them. In terms of the way the strategy will be structured, well, we've framed the call for evidence around 6 themes. We hope they'd endure. They might change, we'll see. But they are firstly risk. Now that's about the mechanics of risk, how we assess risk appetite, how we translate that into action, and importantly, how we use data to drive an understanding of risk and decision making around risk in a way that we haven't done before, but we have new opportunities to do now. Second theme is accountability. We want to make sure that roles and responsibilities in all of the public sector are really clear. They're well defined in some places, less well defined in others. It's fair to say that central government's responsibilities are probably least well defined of all. And for my money, one of the most important things we need to do is set out really clearly a set of expectations around what central government does. But as part of that, we'll also revisit specifically the operation of the Civil Contingencies Act and see what improvements can be made there. The third theme is partnerships, the idea that there are bits of society, bits of the economy that are not of government, but are adjacent to government and have a distinct role to play, and that role needs to be clearly defined too. So here we're talking about critical national infrastructure, potentially academia, which is a huge asset in the UK, national scale voluntary organisations. Bodies that will work in partnership with government might have a clearly defined role, could be clearly defined as part of national planning and response, and where there is probably room for growth in what we do. The fourth theme is community. This is the point about the whole of society response. So how do we mobilise the generality of business? How do we mobilise communities, families, individuals? How do we mobilise community groups, small-scale voluntary organisations, and so forth? What are the expectations we set out? What is the support we give? How do we describe that? You know, it's really tricky. People respond well to direct and immediate risk that they understand. They respond less well to generalised encouragement to plan. How do we cut through that? The fifth area is investment. And I think this thematic area will be interesting, not just because we'll spell out very clearly what government will invest into resilience, but also because we have to tell a story about where the rest of the investment for resilience comes from. What falls on businesses, what falls on customers as a consequence of costs falling on business. What can we expect individuals and communities to add to the pot? How do we describe that, and how do we achieve it in a way which is fair and robust and resilient in its own right? How do we make sure that it is supporting the right kind of activity? But we want to have a very clear story on that, because we see investment as the key enabler. And then the sixth area is about global interconnectedness. We import from America the idea of homeland security. Homeland security makes much less sense in the UK for the very simple reason that we don't have a huge central hinterland. We aren't, we aren't the US, we aren't Russia, we aren't China. We are a nation which has incredible global networks and incredible interconnectedness, and we rely on that interconnectedness for our social links, our economic links, our trade, but also we recognise that interconnectedness is a vector for risk, and so partnerships, bilateral, multilateral, to manage risk, to spot risk, is absolutely central. And COVID, more than anything, speaks to the importance of understanding that interconnectedness and the importance of both domestic and collective action in the face of global risk. So that's the resilience strategy. That's where we're going. Like I say, I really encourage you to respond to the call for evidence. It's not the only thing. We are overhauling the national security risk assessment process. So this is the framework for assessing risk, and we use that to push out a steady, measured assessment across the risk landscape, across government, beyond government. We publish the National Risk Register on the back of it. We're looking at how we assess risk, way in which we measure it, the effectiveness of the process we've got, and whether it can be improved, the timeliness of it, and whether we can do more stuff on a rolling basis. We have also got particular thoughts on improving the way we communicate risk. It's all very well producing an excellent document which covers in great detail for the benefit of government what the risk landscape looks like. But unless it connects with people, then you won't achieve that whole of society effect. It won't have that amplifying benefit that we want it to have. And if risk really is the golden thread, that becomes the bit that we have to crack. Now, we've enlisted external help on that. We've got the Royal Academy of Engineering to bring in a very wide range of external stakeholders to feed into our review process, and in various parliamentary committees. There's one particular House of Lords committee which have been looking at this and advising on it from a sort of public and political perspective. So we're expecting potentially quite big changes there. The other bit of the policy landscape I'll just mention is the spending review. The spending review will set budgets from next year onwards. My central message on that is that none of us should expect a windfall. The fiscal landscape is incredibly hard, and whilst on one level I would like to think that the lesson of the pandemic would be you should spend more on resilience, actually there are many things that we need to commit money to, and we will have to fight to make a case that resilience is a critically important thing, not least in light of other pressures on public services. My hope is that we can make forward progress in terms of the amount government invests in critical areas, particularly growing risk areas such as cyber, but we'll have to see how that plays out. And I think there are certain targeted lessons from the pandemic particularly, and certain bits of our institutional landscape, for example, the functioning of local resilience forums, where we've committed more resource on a temporary basis, and there are questions about whether to make that permanent. So on the SR, no one should be expecting a windfall for resilience, but I think there are some things that we will want to bake into the system, and hopefully we can achieve that. So the final thing I wanted to talk about was our relationship with the emergency planning profession. So I find it quite interesting to reflect on our relationship with the profession, not least because when I was doing the Civil Contingencies Act, I spent a huge amount of time engaging with EPS and other civil protection organisations, and I got to know people incredibly well, and I found myself advocating for the work of those people who work in the resilience field beyond central government, and that had a defining effect on my view on how resilience is managed, and the criticality, particularly of the local level as a building block of resilience. It is something that I genuinely believe in. And so I spent a lot of time, because we went through a process with the Act of really helping to reinvigorate the profession at a local level, and the statutory footing made a massive difference at the time to that. And so what I find intriguing is there are some areas where the world has moved on dramatically, and real problems there, things that felt like massive sticking points or things that were new, have bedded in and work incredibly well. But equally, I find it fascinating that there are some areas where we seem to be having the same debates that we were having almost 2 decades ago. And I find it intriguing also that those things haven't necessarily moved on. So where does that leave me in terms of my thinking about the profession and how we engage with it? Well, I think there are several elements to it. Some of it is about kind of the services we're providing and what we do. One of those specifically is our stewardship of the Emergency Planning College. There I'll simply say that we regard the Emergency Planning College as a critically important asset in our work to build resilience generally, and we think there is a lot to do to rethink how the EPC is used in a post-COVID world where we have that appetite, we have this desire for people to do more. It should be an engine room of both doctrine and delivery, and I want to commit the resources to make that happen. There's massive opportunity there. In terms of how we share information or what we're doing to help build professions, I think we could go a lot further than we have of late in terms of opening up that relationship. I am very keen that we establish what is essentially a national level body where we on a very regular basis in CCS come together with the key organisations that represent the emergency planning and civil protection community. We've done that in a very broad sense as part of our wider strategy work, because we established in the summer a UK resilience forum, which was designed to be a platform for national level debate on issues of strategy around resilience. But here I'm talking about something which is much more about, a co-ownership of the direction of resilience as a sort of professional area. So both questions of professional discipline, but also an openness about the challenges we face and the support that we can give from government, as well as a vehicle for discussion in detail, in kind of open and frank detail about challenges beyond government for resilience professionals. And I just feel like that kind of closer relationship using the representative organisation should be a really important feature as we go through what could be quite a significant period of change around resilience, but then it should endure beyond that. I just don't have a worldview which is, we pronounce stuff on resilience, it's handed down in tablets of stone and everyone else gets on with it. and you kind of pay attention to some stuff from government and you ignore the rest of it. There has to be a really, really strong sense of co-creation, and that requires a lot of effort on our side, and we are willing to put that effort in. But the other part of that, I think, will be some honesty about where we are going and the importance of working together to tell a really clear story. We are your best friends in government, and we need that relationship to work in two ways. We need to be in a place where there's a high degree of trust, but we work together to sell the profession in the best possible light. We make sure that people see that emergency planners are the engine room of response to crisis. And in a volatile world, they are some of the most important people in every organisation. And we should all be telling that, we should all be selling that story, giving people that message together. And so if we have disagreements about the future of things, we need to share those in private and work them through. But publicly, we want to be presenting a clear and united front that emergency planning and the resilience agenda is not an optional extra, it's something which is central to the life of the nation and something which people should not sideline. And I will do everything that I can to make sure our relationship is a productive one. And I will be as honest and direct with you as I can be. And we will meet as often as we need to. So that's what I want to say. That's my kind of, finish on my personal manifesto. I hope that was a helpful tour through the landscape as I see it, as we see it in government. And I am very happy to take any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Roger. Can you hear me? Just a thumbs up if you can. We're just curating the chat at the moment. Loads coming in, as you can imagine. And what was, I think, particularly powerful, I think I do remember some of the very early sessions actually back around the Act, is to remember and remind ourselves that, of course, you've been with us since the beginning in many ways, certainly very much early around the Civil Contingencies Act. And one of the things coming over in the chat and obviously in the questions, and actually I've had some private messages as well, is just that relief that you get us, you understand what it is that we do, you clearly share the passion that we have for the field. I think the field is very bruised at the moment. It shouldn't have had to fall on us to repeatedly defend exactly your last point and to remind the public that there is an engine room, and we really thank you for that. We lost a mentor that I believe has also worked with you in the past over the summer, and one of the last messages she had and I had together was about the evidence given by a Prime Minister's advisor that there were no plans and no planning. And at that point, she and I agreed that we would never let that happen again, that the public would be led to believe that there was no engine room. We are the definitive Cinderellas in this. I know many colleagues who were working 17-hour days who could not convince their head teachers of their children's schools that they were key workers because there was no such thing as emergency planning, and the mainstream media was saying there were no plans. So I think the relief that we feel to what you said there has come out so strongly, and I cannot thank you enough. So many questions. I actually want to start with one towards the end, really, kind of the practicing what you preach. One of the big themes in the questions coming in are around connections, proving that this works. What are the operational plans? Obviously, you can't go into too much detail, but for testing the National Situational Centre and getting involved in some of that operational side. How do we know it's working? You have to re-win our trust, I think, as well. So I sound like Greta Thunberg there, but how do we know that strategic function is going to be tested to see that it will work next time?
So I think there are 3 points there that I might address. So on the the sort of the situation centre and testing and so forth. Now we are revisiting all of our systems and looking at how we manage crisis in the centre of government, and there are lots of hard lessons for us that we are really actively trying to address. And some of that means kind of a bit of brutal self-reflection, but it also means developing new plans and testing them. One of the things that fell into abeyance as a consequence of Brexit and then COVID was our national exercising programme. The peculiarity of that was actually we ended up exercising stuff more than ever. And so we're starting the national exercise programme with a much clearer cycle of effort across the full range of risks. But that process of exercising more than ever was really interesting because we, inside government, we've become far more innovative around exercising and have we have a lot more products in relation to how exercising works and so on. So actually, I'm quite optimistic on the front of how we change and test those systems. On the point about trust, I will simply observe that I'm not going to put a huge amount of effort in getting you to trust me. I am your representative on earth when it comes to the inner workings of government. I absolutely regard your roles as central, and I will fight for that. It's just a waste of time for us to spend 6 months working out whether I can be relied on to speak up on behalf of emergency planners when I spent 20 years doing it. But there is a difference, which is the trust of the rest of government. How does the rest of government act? And that is a different thing. So I think we need to be tight between CCS and the profession. And I think we need to think together about how we have a job in persuading you about trusting the rest of government. And I think we need to work together to think about how that is best done. But generally on these matters, I think the proof is in the pudding, and we need to demonstrate this through the way that we revisit plans, rebuild systems, and so forth. Final point I'll make on that, what you said at the start is we do need to be realistic as well about lessons of the pandemic. It was not the case that the pandemic came along and if only we'd listened to emergency planners, the world would have been fine. I think my starting point is there's lots of stuff from the pandemic which showed that our systems were not adequate. And that is not just true of government, it's true of everybody. So there is a need to recognise that and kind of internalise it and just sort of be big enough to move on from it and think about how we make it better. So we just have to be brutally honest. This worked, this didn't work. We should have done more of this. We should have done less of that. This is how it needs to be in future. We do that on a platform of trust between us and you. We sell our collective story into the rest of government, and we sell the rest of government's story into you. And we're the bridge for that. And then we have systems which are new and improved, and we test them and exercise them, and we have plans which reflect them. And that would be my, that's my kind of take on how it all fits together.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. A practical one, please. I'll do two at once because obviously. So the first part will be who is the national forum that you spoke about, and how can people get involved with that? And then if you could answer in the second part, I think a growing concern reflected in a couple of questions about the use of behavioural insight. And for the difference between perhaps trying to understand the public, and of which we are obviously all members, and the use of nudge and psychological insight to create a community response that may not necessarily reflect where an authentic response would have gone. So 2 questions there, please.
Sorry, on the national forums, I think there were two I referred to when I spoke. The first is the new UK Resilience Forum, which brings together a host of national level organisations. So, for example, the LGA, National Police Chiefs Council, Environment Agency, and about 25 different organisations representing a range of different aspects of society. It's not got a hierarchical relationship with LRFs. It's designed as a sort of body for consultation at a national level, meets every 6 months, reflects on the risk environment, reflects on strategic direction. That met for the first time in the summer. The attendance and minutes were published, and they can be found on gov.uk. And we can probably let you have the link afterwards if people would find that helpful. The other forum I mentioned was establishing a group which brings together the key professional sort of representative organisations for the resilience community, so we can discuss how the profession is properly supported, what the challenges are, doctrinal issues, funding issues, and so forth. I am keen on this because we had a similar group to that when we did the Act. It worked very well. It gave me real insight into what was going on across the profession and the challenges and the things we needed to tackle. We did it for the Act, and then it sort of fell into abeyance, and we need to do more of that kind of thing. So that's what I have in mind, and we'd hope to get that up and running during the autumn. Sorry, remind me what the second question was.
On the use of, or perhaps overuse of, behavioural insight. So I think one particular concern in emergency planning is...
Yes, yeah, with you, yeah. Yeah, so I think this goes to the heart of the debate on how we achieve the whole of society response. It's one of the hardest areas to get evidence on. It is an area where there's a very checkered history of failed attempts to mobilise the public for a whole variety of different things. It works well where the risk is really well understood and relatively narrow. People can engage with it and the advice is clear. It works less well when it's framed more generally. And we need to use all the levers at our disposal to get inside of that. It's always possible that any one discipline can be the flavour of the month. I think at the start of the pandemic, a lot of people got very excited about behavioural economics and all sort of behavioural science, and thought that this would unlock an understanding of how the public will behave. And a lot of it was proven right, and a lot of it was proven wrong. So I see it as one discipline that feeds into a broader question about how we mobilise the public, rather than the be-all and end-all. And I think that's one of the points we're making the resilience.
That's fantastic to know, and I think that also fits with what you were saying in your very strong and very needed answer on trust, which is, of course, these were things the emergency planners were raising, and I think what you've shown us today is there will now be perhaps more of a forum by which we can talk to you about some of these things, and what we'll do is some of the questions we need to put into, I think, as an FAQ for time. And also so that you can perhaps gather the sense of perhaps sort of strategic and operational, not distress, but concern within the profession. So, for example, the role of the red teams at MHCLG, although obviously that's changed its name this week. Things like what guidance will be updated and when. I mean, as you will understand, we have several members on the call right now who are giving evidence at either one of two very major inquiries, Manchester and Grenfell, who were aware and had made concerns known that guidance had not been updated at the time of either the arena bombings or the fire. How can we get those answers to those questions? You've really reassured us on access to you. Obviously, it's quite expensive to buy courses at the Emergency Planning College. There's a request in the questions for maybe a gateway newsletter to be resurrected. How can we get information to you and information from you?
So, I mean, firstly, the resource in what is now the Department for Levelling Up and Housing in Communities, that red team there is a massive asset, and if it doesn't work as well as it should, and I recognise there are differing views on that, then we need to get it to work really, really well. You know, I used to have one very junior official facing off to the whole of the local emergency planning community. Now there are dozens of them. That is a massive asset. The trick is not to say this doesn't work. The trick is to say, how do we get it to work properly? Secondly, I think that the question of how we engage, how we manage the information flows is precisely the kind of topic which we could put to the new group that I talked about earlier, which brings together the professional representatives. We won't have the answers on that, and we need a sort of demand signal from the market on what you want, because we can respond to that. There'll be some features that are obvious, you know, regular visibility of what is going on and a regular dialogue about, you know, sort of doctrinal and training priorities. Those things seem to me to be central, but how we do that, how we get that out there and how we respond to it is something that we need to discuss. Much better for us to discuss it than for us here in the centre just to decide.
That makes a lot of sense, thank you. I will make sure the others come to you as an FAQ. There's a particular request for how this fits with climate change, a very, very apt question, and several questions about professionalism. We would love to be a chartered institute, as you're aware, but I know your answer to that is that you already we have your full support in our next year's work programme in 2022. Which will be a heavy workload on us, but one we're fully committed to, which is to once and for all kind of solidify and clarify our professionalisation, and that you are very much cited on and hopefully a partner with our CPD and learning pathway work. So I'm answering your question for you there. One final question, if I may, which is, do you and your team watch Cobra on Sky One? And any comments on that, please?
My team have watched it. It was on before I took this job, and I don't have Sky TV at home, so I haven't watched it. And they told me it was rubbish, and therefore I'm unwilling to pay the money to watch it. But if it did come on normal telly, I think I probably would, just out of interest. In my experience, TV drama is not necessarily the most reliable chronicler of the reality of emergency response. So yeah, that's where I am on that.
Thank you, Roger. You heard it here first, folks. And on a similar note, do you have a planthem, a go-to song that gets you ready for an activation of the National Situation Centre? Put my teeth in. What's your planthem?
We don't, but it's a good idea, because one of the features is a PA system that allows us to broadcast across the CITSEN. So there's loads of them sitting out there. Maybe when I'm off this call, I will put something on and give them a surprise, though I've no idea what I'll put on yet. So I'll give that some thought.
Roger, we can go better than that. We actually have a conference planthem Spotify, so I will send that over to you for the team, which is a compilation of, we've been gathering them for a month, the Emergency Planning Society's planthem anthems. So I'll get those to you. That has done what we needed it to do, Roger. Thank you so much. I'm being bombarded by both chats and questions, but also WhatsApps privately, where people are just so relieved. We needed to hear that, and we're incredibly grateful to you. It won't be long before we talk again as a society to you. So thank you for that offer, and I'll get the FAQs from you as soon as possible. Appreciation from all of us, Roger. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I just wanted to leave a little bit of time there for us to queue up Sam, because she's joining us.
And thank you for inviting me.
Oh, our pleasure, Roger. Thank you. So